There's an old joke about a married couple who keeps fighting and fighting and fighting. So what do? They go to the rabbi for advice. The rabbi asks, "How can I help you?" And the couple explained. They were young, they were in love, they thought that was all they needed to make a marriage work. Even though they came from different religious backgrounds, they thought their love would be enough to overcome everything. They ignored all the people in their life, their parents, their family, their friends, everyone who told them that their religious differences, the differences in their practices and their beliefs were going to be too much for a good marriage to be sustained. And now, as the years have gone by, they find themselves constantly fighting. So they come to the rabbi. And the rabbi says to them, "I'm not sure I can really be of help. I'm not sure what I could do. My expertise is only in the area of Judaism. Perhaps you should see somebody, a therapist, a counselor, somebody who specializes in this kind of thing, who can talk to each of you about your different faiths." The wife replies, "Jewish expertise is all we need. I'm Ashkenazi, he's Sephardic." We see it today in our Haftorah. Two different readings. There are differences when it comes to Pesach, differences when it comes to where in the service Hagvah goes, the beginning or the end of the Torah services. But I wanted to start off with that to lighten the mood. Because what I'm going to talk about today is something that I know for many, it's not their favorite subject to hear about. I know that intermarriage and interfaith relationships and interfaith families carries a lot of baggage for many people. It's a charged word in the Jewish community. So all I ask this morning, whether you're joining us in person or at home, you're watching this later on YouTube, is that you listen. You listen to what I want to say, and I'm happy afterwards if anybody wants to send me an email, to talk on the phone, to chat on Zoom. I'm happy to listen to whatever you want to say. Now, the topic I want to speak about starts with interfaith families. And for some that means intermarriage, but the truth is there are a variety of what interfaith families mean. And the category I want to mention first is the one that I fall into. I'm part of an interfaith family. Now, before that comes out of context, my wife is Jewish. More precisely, as many of you know, she's a Jew by choice. She was raised Catholic and converted to Judaism. She took a class, she studied for over a year, observed the rituals and holidays, was questioned by a Beit Din, and finally she went to the mikvah. So how, you may ask, am I part of an interfaith family? Well, today, you see, isn't just any old Shabbat. It's also my daughter's first Christmas. Because while my wife may have chosen to be Jewish, and our daughter is undoubtedly Jewish, her grandparents didn't take a class. They didn't go to a Beit Din. They didn't go into the mikvah. And so tonight, when Shabbat ends, after we do Havdalah, we're driving over to Grandma and Grandparents' house to open presents under their tree. And I'm sure the image of the rabbi's daughter sitting around a Christmas tree isn't a favorite for many. When I mentioned to some friends what I wanted to speak about this morning, they suggested I pick a different topic, that I don't talk about this. In the end, I kept going back to the advice a mentor of mine gave me a couple of years ago. But if you're not doing anything wrong, then you hold your head up high and you live your life. You don't pretend otherwise. So it's true, I could easily have picked any other topic to speak about this morning. There are so many topics that are relevant in our world today. But my question is, what else would anybody expect we're doing if you think about it? People know that my wife Lauren chose to be Jewish. I imagine they also know that her parents didn't choose that. I could forbid my daughter from going over this time of year when their tree is up. I could demand the only gifts they're allowed to give her for Hanukkah this time of year. But why? I think about all the time somebody in our own community has told me how painful it is that their own grandchild isn't coming over to celebrate the holiday with them because they're not being raised Jewish. If your own granddaughter was growing up in a non-Jewish household, how painful would it be if they weren't allowed to visit you because your Hanukkah was out? If they weren't allowed to come over to Rosh Hashanah dinner because their family didn't want them being raised Jewish? I expect my in-laws will come to Jewish celebrations, even if they come to synagogue sometimes. In fact, they've been here before. They were here for our wedding, they were here for our daughter's baby naming, and they've been here before on just a Shabbat morning. I imagine in the future they'll be in synagogue on many other occasions, because they're too part of an interfaith family. They'll come to our house for Shabbat dinners, they've come for Pesach. It only seems right that we would do the same for them. To be clear, our daughter will never do things like take communion, but maybe one day she'll go with Grandma to a holiday Mass. If Grandma and Grandpa support our faith, why shouldn't we be a part of their lives and support them? And I bring all of this up because it's a well-kept secret. It's not a secret. It's something that we don't talk about, we don't acknowledge. But I'm not the only Jewish person who has non-Jewish in-laws, who has non-Jewish family members. We saw in our parsha today, Moshe Rabbeinu has non-Jewish in-laws. But it's not just me and it's not just Moshe. Many members of the Jewish community. Just this past year, Rabbi Grover and I oversaw over 20 newly minted members of the tribe. Across the conservative movement, there are at least 2,000 individuals each year who undergo conversion. And that's just within the conservative movement. There are tens of thousands of Jews who have non-Jewish parents, non-Jewish siblings, non-Jewish cousins, non-Jewish nieces and nephews. Tens of thousands of Jews who are part of interfaith families. Not marriage, but families. And they, of course, are going to be participating in other celebrations along with their family. I don't know what else we would expect. Now, again, there's that distinction. I'm not advocating that we should have Christmas trees, that we should celebrate the religious aspects of other holidays, but we should be part of family celebrations, family gatherings. We should celebrate the milestones of other family members even when they occur in a different place of worship. Today in the Jewish calendar, it's another day too, Nidl. It's a little-known holiday. It's mostly observed in some areas of the Hasidic community. And what it is a very solemn day that's observed on Christmas. Some of the customs might seem strange to us in 2021. For example, you're supposed to eat garlic on Nidl. It helps ward off the demons and evil spirits that come down on Christmas Eve. But there's another custom, a custom that it's forbidden to study Torah. The question is, why would it be forbidden to study Torah? When you think about it in context, this holiday and its laws and customs developed at a time when the Jewish community was regularly persecuted by their non-Jewish neighbors. I know you could open up a history book and turn to any page and you'd find a time and a place where that was the norm. And that was the idea behind this. Don't go out to synagogue in groups wandering around at night. Don't be gathering late at night in the study halls or have the lights on in your home as you sit by a holy book, reading Torah, learning Talmud, studying. Because the Christian mobs, as they come home from their sermons and their masses, might find you. But today we live in a different world. We don't need to fear the mob returning from a Christmas sermon. I live in a world where my Catholic mother-in-law schlepped all the way from Scarborough to Sobeys and then to our house to cook us dinner when we came back from vacation so that we'd have food to eat waiting for us in our fridge. And in North America, most Jews live in that world, in a world integrated with non-Jews, So the question is, how do we navigate that world? I want to transition for a moment to a story that comes from the Talmud. Many people don't realize this, but there's a character in the Talmud by the name of Yeshu, Jesus. And scholars debate if this refers to the historical Jesus, the Jesus that Christianity talks about, or other people by the same name. But in Tractate Sanhedrin of the Talmud, there's a story of the lesson I want to share. Yeshu and his teacher, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Parachia, are traveling to Jerusalem. They stay one night in an inn, and they receive just the greatest service ever. Rabbi Yehoshua says to his student Yeshu, how beautiful this inn is. Well, in Hebrew, the word for inn and the word for eyes are very similar, and Yeshu misunderstands what he's saying and thinks he's commenting on the beautiful eyes of the innkeeper's wife. So Yeshu replies, what? Her eyes look a little bit narrow to me. His teacher is outraged, upset that he would think, that his student would think that he was looking at the innkeeper's wife, that his student was thinking about such unholy matters. So what does he do? He sends him away in anger. He excommunicates him, the Talmud tells us, with the blast of 400 shofarot, 400 trumpets. Now that's being kicked out in style. Yeshu comes to his teacher to repent. Again and again he comes to ask forgiveness, to try to re-enter the community. And each time his teacher, Rabbi Yehoshua, sends him away. Till finally, Yeshu comes one final time to see his teacher to ask forgiveness, wanting to be a part of the community. And his teachers pause in prayer and signals to him to wait a moment. But Yeshu, after being sent away so many times, thinks the gesture is just again him being rejected. So he goes off in anger and worships an idol. And that's where the story ends. It's an interesting story. It's hard to make sense of. But the next teaching that comes in the Talmud is about when you're dealing with somebody who has a Yetzer Hara, an evil inclination. And it says that when you're trying to help somebody who's being led by their evil inclination, their Yetzer Hara, you have to push them away with one hand and pull them in with the other. It's telling that this next passage appears when the first story ends so abruptly. There's a lesson. Because Yeshu is pushed away and only pushed away. And in the end, one of the greatest difficulties the Jewish people have ever experienced, which was living for so long, being persecuted in a Christian world, was the result of just pushing people away. We made our own enemies, rather than pushing with one hand and pulling in with the other. And so today we live in a world where most of us don't live in the world of Niddelnach. We don't live in a world separate from our non-Jewish neighbors. We live among them. There are co-workers, they are friends, and for many, many Jews, they are family. There are tens of thousands of Jews like me who have non-Jewish family members, and there are tens of thousands more who have married into non-Jewish families. And I want to be clear, I'm not equating the two. Marrying somebody not Jewish and marrying somebody who went through conversion, they're not the same thing. But there is a commonality between them. In both, there exists a part of your identity that you have to leave out of Jewish spaces. It's rarely, if ever, spoken about in places like this. A part of you that you're not really supposed to acknowledge when you enter a synagogue, a Jewish school, a community center. A part of you don't get to share. I know early when we were dating, when my wife Lauren would come with me to synagogue, she felt a lot of pressure. At the time, she was still in the process of her conversion, And people would talk to her at Kiddush and play Jewish geography, and she was always afraid she would say the wrong thing and be outed. And it wasn't that anyone ever said anything bad or mean when they did find out that she was in the process of converting, that she didn't grow up Jewish. In fact, the people in our community were incredibly kind and friendly to her. But there's still a difference between feeling like you can be your full self and people being nice. A difference, as a congregant once shared with me recently, between being friendly and being welcoming. And I know that for me personally, I could have picked a plethora of other topics that would have been less controversial. But this is my life, it's my family. It doesn't feel good to think I have to pretend that it's not. So I can only imagine how other Jews feel, Jews that are part of an interfaith family, when they enter a Jewish space, when a part of their identity is rarely mentioned, if ever, and when it is, it's usually attacked. Ask yourself, how would it feel to walk into to be in an interfaith relationship and walk into a synagogue, to hear a sermon about how intermarriage is destroying Judaism? Ask yourself, how welcome would you feel in a Jewish space if you were the parent or grandparent of someone intermarried, and that was what you heard everyone else saying? The only thing you heard them saying about interfaith marriage. How welcome would someone whose brother or sister in an interfaith relationship be in our spaces? And perhaps most of all, there are many, many Jewish children of interfaith couples. How welcome do they feel in synagogues and other Jewish institutions when all they hear about intermarriage is that it's the worst thing a Jew can ever do? I can only imagine, but I can tell you through experience that feeling like a part of your identity has to be a secret doesn't feel good. For decades and decades and decades, we've been pushing people away. And all that's happened is like Yeshu in the story in the Talmud. People that want to reconnect, people that want to participate and engage in Jewish life, they don't just walk the other direction, they run. They run so far and so fast, we'll never see them again. I'm not saying there should be no boundaries. You push with one hand and you pull with the other. I'm saying we can maintain boundaries and do a better job of welcoming people. Today's Christmas, but it's also Shabbat. And I'm sure Grandma and Grandpa would have loved to have their granddaughter over last night for Christmas Eve. They would have loved for her to be there today, to wake up this morning, just as their own daughter did when she was a child. But it's Shabbat. So last night we lit candles, we said our prayers, we had Shabbat dinner. Today, you know where I am. I'm here in synagogue. And later tonight, after Shabbat is over, when our boundaries won't be violated, that's when we'll drive over. We'll participate as a family and celebrate with Grandma and Grandpa. There have to be boundaries. I wouldn't officiate an interfaith wedding. It's a boundary I'm not comfortable crossing. But I've sat with interfaith couples thinking about getting married, trying to help them navigate the road ahead, the difficulties they will face. I wish them a mazel tov. I hope that their life together is one of joy and happiness. And I talk to them about conflicts that they're going to face in the future, things to think about in terms of how they want to raise their kids, how to navigate the different traditions of their families. And I give suggestions to the many interfaith couples who intend to raise Jewish children on how to nurture a sense of Jewish identity in them. How, as a non-Jewish parent and spouse, you can support creating a Jewish home and raising Jewish children. I'm not saying I found a perfect solution to this dilemma, but I'm trying to find a balance between pushing with one hand and pulling with the other. Setting boundaries of what I can do as a rabbi, and yet not pushing people away who want to engage in the Jewish world. I don't know that I found a perfect balance, but only that we can't keep doing what we've been doing. Since Jews first started being accepted into the non-Jewish world, we've been pushing them away, pushing away interfaith families. in an attempt to prevent more from happening. But it doesn't work. In the United States, over 50% of couples getting married today are interfaith couples with a Jewish spouse and a non-Jewish one. Here in Canada, roughly 30% of Jews under the age of 45 currently have a non-Jewish partner. We can keep pushing people away, but that's 30% of our community. That's also their children, their siblings, their parents, their friends. Last year, the UJA did a survey here in Toronto of interfaith families and found that over half of them are raising their kids as Jewish. And over half of them feel unwelcome in Jewish settings. They want to be more involved in Jewish communal institutions, but they don't feel there is a place they can go, a place where they can be their full selves and be accepted for who they are. Maybe that's the message we want to send, is they're not welcome in our institutions. But we have to realize we're not setting boundaries, we're pushing them away. We're pushing away half of the Jewish community. Well, the other question is, can we try something different? Can we stop defining ourselves by what we aren't? Pretending that to be Jewish means simply to not be Christian. Being Jewish this time of year means not opening presents, not having a tree, not sitting in Santa's lap. Judaism came first. We're not defined as not Christianity. We're defined by what we are, by our values, by our lessons, by our teachings. And that's what we should focus on, not what we are not, but what is special about our tradition. What does the observance of Jewish law or the practice of Jewish values add to our lives? We can live that, and we can share that with anybody who wants to participate. Judaism enriches my life in numerous ways. So why not create spaces where all Jews, no matter who is in their family tree, can experience the richness of our tradition for themselves. Shabbat Shalom.